Howdy folks, Rudros here, and welcome to another Set 5 Deck Tech. This time we are looking at the affectionately named Blurple for Set 5. This is the blue-purple combination. So I wanted to look at a few of the new cards we have, and on my other deck techs, I'm usually pretty confident in the things I put out, but this one is definitely a bit more of a work in progress. I think there's a lot of different ways you could take the Blurple deck. Last set, I saw a pretty effective one where it was utilizing Tamatoa in the item package, and I'd considered that as well, but it takes up so many slots to run the Tamatoas, you need the Popsicles, you need the Flavershams, and you need Lucky Dime as well. And it's very effective. It can go quick. You know, Tamatoa Dime is still just a very powerful tool. But with some of the new things I wanted to try out, I just didn't really have space for it. That might still be the superior way to play this color combination, but we'll find out. So I wanted to delve into a couple of the new cards we got, such as the Merlin Legendary Intellectual Visionary. And I will say with the matches you're going to see coming up, I have been tooling with this deck a lot. I've been adding pieces, taking pieces away. So you're going to see some pieces in those matches that are no longer in this current final version of the build, just because I'm trying out different things. So look at some of the new pieces. Cogsworth on 1. This card is kind of weird. I don't really want to put it out turn 1, so in a way it kind of limits what we can put out turn 1. I mean, you can just put it out as a body, and I have a few times. But ideally, you want to put it out with another character you just played that turn to give it rush. Giving something like the Crab Rush or the Goat Rush is quite powerful, since Fox is the only card that inherently has Rush. Or even a Rafiki Challenger, you can just 1/1, then Rafiki goes in right away. It's quite nice. It can also shift into the big Cogsworth, which I think has only come up once, but that's a possibility. We are running Squirrel Merlin as well as the new Turtle Merlin, and the idea is because we're running this new Merlin Intellectual Visionary, he must shift onto a target in order to get the search off of him. This can be very potent, probably one of your best things you can do. Let's say you need instant spot removal. You shift on with the big Merlin. You can search out any card from your deck, which you don't have to reveal to your opponent. You search out Let It Go, and then Merlin himself can immediately sing Let It Go because he's a 6 cost. So that's probably the most common line I take with it. If you're not under pressure and you have the time, you can really just get whatever you think benefits you. If you need more card draw, you can get Friends. If you want to put on some location pressure, you can get the Castle. If you want to set up for next turn, maybe you get the Elsa. But Let It Go is a really powerful line. Okay, this has to die now. Here comes Merlin. Let's go get Let It Go. I try to avoid shifting onto Goat and Rabbit as much as I can, as their exit triggers are very, very good, and you really do want to recur those over and over again. And like if you were to bounce this Merlin after you shifted onto the Goat, you're not going to get the lore exit. So I try to shift mainly onto the Turtle, the Crab, and the Squirrel. Original versions of this build had way more of these cards, but I found I would just get bricked with him, as it was difficult to line up some of the Merlins, and if he doesn't shift, he's really not worth playing, so I kind of just cut him down to 2. The Chica is very, very interesting. I do like this card, especially if you put it out turn 2, and you'll see we're running the Mama Odie package, so that Chica says during your turn, whenever you put a card into your inkwell, if it's the second card you've put in, you get to draw a card. So if you put Chica out, you naturally ink for turn, and then you use like Fishbone Quill, or let's say you sing a song and Mama Odie's on the field, and she sees that second ink, she'll draw you a card. That feels really good. It kind of replaces the card you would lose from Fishbone Quill. However, I've noticed you really only want to do this as you're starting the game. As the game goes deeper, you don't want to forcibly put in 2 ink just to trigger a single draw. Usually you want to keep your cards in hand over that. But early, she's quite good, and her support, do not overlook the support. I'll show you in some of these matches. Like, support for 2 can be quite nice, especially when you have rush cards like the Fox. Maleficent, I had it too. She's a 1. You could take her out. She, like, in theory, she can slow down aggro. So if you're having trouble with aggro matches, she can bounce a Daisy. She can bounce basically any of the small bodies they put out. She can even bounce most of the bodyguards. She doesn't tend to hit a lot of relevant items. I mean, maybe if they had like a Sleepy's Flute, but I haven't even seen Steel Song yet, this set. So she's, I don't know, she's okay. I like that she quests for 2, but I think you could easily cut that slot. This is all standard. Merlin. Turtle Merlin is fine. Him questing for 2 can be kind of nice. He's mainly in here as a shift target for this Merlin. I don't think I would ever play this in any traditional Merlin packages. Hades, you absolutely need in here. A lot of the games I tried without him, and it just felt awful because that's one of the downsides of this color combination is it just doesn't have a lot of spot removal. So I finally went in 4 on the Let It Go and the 2 Hades because you just need ways to get, if they play a Tamatoa, you have to get that off the field. You can't win with that card on the field if that game's still going. Elsa is really nice. Not only can she shift, you can be a shift target for the bigger Elsa, just the exertion on play and the rush and the evasive. She can even quest afterwards pretty safely. This card is felt very, very good, way more than I originally thought it would. And then Big Elsa is just a wonderful late game payoff for this deck. Cogsworth, it's more resist, which you're going to be challenging a lot. That's one of your main forms of removal in this deck, so he's very strong for that. It Calls Me is kind of just a cheap song to proc the Odie. There are probably better things you could put in here, but I was inspired by my buddy Jerry, who showed me his original version of this deck earlier this week, so I got to give a shout out to him. And he had like the Odie on the field with the Chica and the Rafiki, saying It Calls Me with Rafiki, which triggered Odie to put it into the Inkwell. Then he inks a single card. Now Chicha triggers. Sorry, I'm probably going to mess this name up a lot. Chicha triggers. And yeah, it was just nice. It was nice. And it just draws a card. I don't think I've ever used the discard, like shuffle or discard effect, but you don't have to. You can just draw cards off of it. Friends card draw, Let It Go spot removal, Fishbone Quill, put it in the Inkwell, and then Castle. I really felt like the deck was lacking just kind of this passive lore gain. It didn't feel fast enough that I felt it needed to have. So I think the Castle is a really good inclusion for that. Let me show you some games and let's talk some Blurple. Game 1 is a mirror match, so you'll kind of get to see it from both sides. I really am looking for Rafiki in my opening hand. I go ahead and keep the Cogsworth. I do have Chicha. And I do have a Merlin, although the only target really is to shift it onto the goat. Again, I just don't really like putting out Cogsworth turn 1. Maybe you should. Maybe that's the right thing to do. But I also have 3 Uninkables in hand, so in case I draw into more, I kind of want to keep him around just in case. Because I do feel like this deck kind of needs to go quick. I don't know. Maybe there's a better early target. I considered, too, putting in the Maleficent, the 1-drop Maleficent that quests for 2, to put on some early lore pressure. Because I think this deck can actually hang a little better with some of the later decks than I first thought it could, but it still doesn't feel amazing. There we finally draw into our Fishbone Quill. So now I've set up with double Chicha. This should be pretty fun for the next turn. Our opponent is on the Tala version of this deck. I saw a few people running that. Mickey is another good way to trigger a Chicha if you're running her. I'm still just not really in on the whole Tala package, so here's a nice thing you can do. We've inked already. Now we quill. We put in the Merlin because we can't do it anyway. Now this triggers both Chichas, so I get to draw 2 cards off of it. That feels pretty good. That feels quite good. And we'll just put out a third one to really try and get some card draw. I don't bother to quest because I know that Mickey can just take one of them out. And if you can get an early Chicha line like this and start ramping, the amount of card draw, it feels good. It is a cool feeling, and it gives you... It replaces the cards you are quote-unquote losing to the Quill for your Inkwell. But you do want to ramp with this deck. I've had some matches where I wasn't able to ramp and it did not feel very good. Our opponent actually shifts into the Tala, which is probably what you want to do, and then do something like that, sing the How Far I'll Go, which is not only a great song for you, now you're getting ink into the Inkwell and your lore is going to start building up. I do like that Tala a lot better when you can shift her like that. I've never really liked playing her for a hard 7. So, we have a lot of options here. We can try to take out this Tala, which I think I might. So I ink twice with the Quill. Look at that. Draw 3 cards off that. That feels quite nice. There's a goat. And check this out. So Quest, they have support. I've just powered up this goat to be an 8-hitter. Boom. Cogsworth, give him rush. Goat takes out an 8 defense body the turn he comes in. That feels really good. Plus, I get the lore from the goat entry and the goat exit. Great way to deal with the Tamatoa, and that's why I was happy I saved that Cogsworth. This Mickey can, of course, trade into one of our Chichas, which our opponent says, yeah, I'm kind of tired of you drawing cards off of that. But that's a nice thing for the Cogsworth. Oh, there's the Fox, which can take out our other Chichas. It was fun while it lasted, and that's okay. Don't feel like... I think some people have gone so far in on the Chicha engine that they think that it has to stick around the whole game. It drew us, 3 to 5 cards? It's okay. It did its job, and we used its support feature to power up the goat to take out an 8-body Grandma Tala. That's good. That's plenty. So I draw first, doing the double ink, trying to see what we can get. I go ahead and scout with the squirrel. I've got squirrel in. I just go ahead and immediately shift onto him. And you can search for whatever you want. You don't have to reveal it to your opponent. See, this is one of those situations where there's nothing I like need at the moment, so I probably am considering the big Elsa, just to keep pressure on. I know I have it next turn, and then Cogsworth can just go ahead and finish off the Fox there. And of course I can't quest with this Merlin this turn because I just put him out, so. And he's a decent body. He does die to Medusa, so that feels bad. I think Ruby in general, I've run this matchup against Ruby, and that's easily its worst matchup. I didn't bother to load any of those games on here because they were just slaughters. Like I played against a red-blue and never had a chance. So Ruby is very tough. Ruby is going to give you a lot of trouble. But maybe if you're playing at a locals where that doesn't matter as much, you're okay with that. Our opponent goes ahead and Cusco's our Fishbone Quill, but it's pretty much done its job. You don't really need to go above 10 ink. I like the idea of being able to play the Elsa and maybe potentially bouncing her after that, although we don't have Snake in here. So I go ahead and take out 2 of those. I have the Merlin quest, and that's it. I just slow down his board a little bit. Elsa's also now threatening a quest for 3. I love this Elsa card, man. It made me sad when it and Ursula disappeared so soon after set 1 ended. But I guess there were just better things to do in the purple colors with Madam Mim and Merlin package. So our opponent does not have card draw, which is why this is a good example of how this deck can struggle, which is why I did put the Chromicon in at one point. I had the Amethyst Chromicon. You'll probably see that in a later video. It was weird that every time I drew it, it was in either a matchup or something where I just didn't want to. By the way, so I used Crab to power up the Chicha so she could take out the Cusco in one shot. Now I've got Merlin on the board. I'm questing for a bunch. I essentially got my opponent on lethal, and he had nothing after that, so they just conceded. Next, we're on to an aggro matchup. I'll show you how this does into aggro, and you have to play it very carefully, but as you can see, there's a Chromicon in my hand. Every time I had the Chromicon, I just didn't want to use it. Like, against this aggro matchup, I don't really want to give them more cards to play with. This is the lemon lime version, but yeah, I didn't want to give them more cards, so I ultimately cut the Chromicon, but I think you could put it in there if you felt like you were lacking card draw. But between the Chicha and the Rabbit and the Friends and even the Castle, I was like, I think I've got enough. So our opponent doesn't quest with the Daisy, potentially scared of what my Rafiki can do, and now they really do have to be scared because Rafiki with the Chicha support can now attack anything for 5. That's pretty good. Here's Kita. Kita comes in. That's why they're doing the shift. So I lose. And they quest with the Kita. Tabletop Simulator can be a little finicky, so the cards get stuck. So the way Kita works is I actually get -3 counters on my cards. So even though a card like Rafiki has 0 attack, his challenger essentially is nullified by that because he'll get +3 and then it'll read the -3 counters. So he'll still be at a 0 when he attacks. And actually, that's what we're doing. We're doing a judge call, talking to some friends on the Discord, like, well, how does this work exactly? So he has both characters have a -3 counter on them. However, there are ways around this. Check this out. So Crab gives him +3. Chicha gives him +2, so now he has +5, plus he attacks, gets another +3. He's a +8, and then he takes the -3 from the Kita, so he's a +5, enough to kill the Daisy. So even though they Kita'd us with the power of Crab and the support from Chicha, don't overlook that, Rafiki was able to one-shot the Daisy, even with -3 counters on him. That feels pretty nice. Between the Crab, the support, the Rafiki, like this deck actually has, I was kind of surprised how well it was able to challenge other characters. It helps with things like Rush and these extra effects, but here comes a remember who you are. So they get to draw up to the same hand size as I do. Pretty solid when you are behind. And at this point, I'm kind of okay. Sensing they're the aggro deck, I'm okay if they want to slow down. I opt not to quest. I'm trying to hold on to the Crab. I'm in my head. I'm like, well, maybe if I can like Crab, and even if it kills itself, it'll like power something else out on the way out. But yeah, this is a fun. This isn't the traditional Amber Amethyst aggro you're going to see, of course, but it's still a version of aggro that you're going to have to deal with. And our opponent just says, "Yep, speaking of aggro, let's go wide." So they pay 5. 2, 2, and 1. And we don't have the spot removal that Ruby has, so everything we do has to be through challenging. And so here I'm considering the Chromicon, but look, they don't have much of a hand. They're not playing their own purple Chromicon because they're not in purple, so I don't really want to use it to give them more cards. I'd rather just sing Friends. and keep my own hand advantage up and not give it to them. I do go for the Quill, as I can get some card draw off the Chicha. I will still have to, I think, ink one naturally. Yep. The nice thing is, too, the Crab is a very good target for the Shift Merlin. So we do that, draw a card. Quest with the Crab. I don't think I ended up inking. I probably could have inked that Fishbone Quill to get a card draw off the Chicha. Our opponent goes wide. And so here's the thing. I have to be able to challenge these cards, right? They look how wide they can go. I don't have a Be Prepared. I don't have a Grab Your Sword, a Tinkerbell. So everything I've got to do has to be through challenging means. So I think this might be one of the instances where I use the Shift Merlin to be like, okay, what is the best way to get out of this? So I ink one, ink a second one, draw for the Chicha. I can challenge plenty of cards. And that's why I'm trying to math out right now. Okay, what is the best way to do this? The Piglet, I mean, yeah, they're 100% on lethal. So I actually put out Cogsworth first, go for the resist, which means Chicha can kill the Flynn without dying. I discard a card for the Flynn trigger. Fox can easily take out... Oh, yeah, so my opponent has the Emerald Chromacon. That was what was making this tricky, too. So when I banish something, they get to bounce characters. They can either bounce their own characters to protect him, like they opted to do, or they can bounce some of my characters. So I did challenge the Daisy with the Fox, and then they bounced back their other characters, so I couldn't challenge them. So at this point, I'm kind of forced to quest. The nice thing is, you also know your opponent doesn't really have a board wipe on this side, unless they're running Under the Sea. So I decide to just go wide and say, okay, let's just go as wide as we can. And I need to catch up on lore now. Because that Chromacon actually is... I don't know if that's worth running in a green list, but it is annoying. And it very much makes me have to be very careful about how I go in and challenge these cards. So we do shift in on the Big Merlin. I could get Let It Go if I wanted instant spot removal. Looks like that is what I want. Your opponent's just checking the card, reading it. And I can instantly sing the Let It Go. I could also sing it with the Cogsworth. It doesn't really matter which one I sing it with. Yep, I probably am assuming I'm targeting Piglet. Might target Morph. Yeah, I go for the Piglet. That represents the most lore. And at this point, I'm assuming I'm probably just going to quest out. There's a rabbit, draw a card. I have the goat in hand. Yeah, and now I've put my opponent on lethal. I'm on 10. They're counting up. I have 19 on board, so goat just means I win. So they essentially have to find a way to win this turn. Granted, they don't know I have the goat, but I remember we were talking, and they were like, yeah, if do I play around the fact that you might have goat? Not, because he count up. You've got exactly 19. If you don't have goat, I've got a chance. So he goes in on the fact, hoping I don't have the goat. And I, of course, do have the goat. So, yeah, that's game. We beat the aggro. Woo! All right, and our final match. This is against Blue Steel. Wanted to show you something with a little more late-game punch. It's not as bad as Red Steel, as Ruby just really messes this deck up, but it is still very difficult. It runs Tamatoa. It runs cards like the Dime. So speaking of tech stuff you could do, if you are running against a lot of these item matchups, or maybe something that also uses locations, you could use Cusco. You could put Cusco in here. You could put Hideaway. I like Cusco a bit better since he's on a body. I feel like this deck's already kind of tight on its slots, so I don't know. Hideaway's just dead in some matchups, right? It's just like Rise of the Titans. When it's good, it's great. And when it's not, well, it's not. It doesn't do anything. It's pretty safe to quest in front of a Tipo because he only has a 1-2. It's also blue-gray, so I know they have no rush, so this Rafiki essentially is in no worry of dying. He goes in and puts one on it anyway now, which is smart because if I counter-challenge, the Rafiki now will die, whereas normally it wouldn't. I use Rabbit. I eat double ink. Chicha draws a card. And this is why, so I'm kind of at this point already where I don't have any more card draw in hand. And if I ink two things a turn, yeah, the Chicha does turn it back, which is quite nice, but I have to be a little mindful of running out of my own card advantage. So opponent trying out Pacha. I actually like that card quite a bit. I don't think it would quite fit in this list, even though I have a location and a few. I think you really need more items or locations to make him consistent. Because I think if he's questing for 2 and getting 2 at the start of the turn, that's going to feel really good. So we do put out the Mama Odie. Here's where Mama Odie with the It Calls Me. We get 1 into the Inkwell. I ink naturally, or I ink with the Quill. Now Chicha's going to trigger. So those are the times I do appreciate that It Calls Me, just because it's so cheap. So I'm able to cast it just for so little. I don't necessarily have to sing it either. especially in a deck like this, I think you need to put on lore pressure. So I don't think you want to be overly singing. Tipo goes ahead and takes out his own mother. And Whole New World, I do lose the Elsa, which is a bit unfortunate, but I'll take a fresh set of 7 hands. Little tabletop simulator issue as I hit the wrong button, so I have to draw naturally that way. Here's another instance. I have the Chromicon. I don't really want to give my opponent more cards in hand. I don't want to get them. I don't want them to get to their dime that much quicker. So I think there are some matchups you will be really grateful for it. So here's Elsa. We immediately exert the Pacha and can send Elsa and the Rabbit in. One more, it calls me. And we put out Squirtlin. Did I cast It Calls Me? Because if I did, I missed the OD trigger, I think. Well, anyway. Sorry, this goes so fast sometimes it's hard to keep up with what's going on. But it goes so slow if I don't speed it up. So I speed it up so you guys can have something quicker to watch. So I do like this combination a lot. I think it's quite fun. Here's good old Tamatoa. But we got the Squirrelin out, so we are ready to... Oh, but he plays the Pete. What an answer, right? So now I can't shift into... I was going to just shift into Merlin, go get Let It Go, and have him sing it, right? And then Tamatoa's done. We can't do that now because of the Pete. However, we can be creative, so check this out. It's not efficient, but it does technically work. So here's how we're going to get rid of this Tamatoa. Quest with the Elsa, bounce it with a Fox, replay the Elsa, exert the Tamatoa, and now get exactly 3 ink. So I can put out the Crab, give it to the Fox, so the Fox hits for 7, and then Odie to finish it off for 8. There you go. We got rid of Tamatoa. A little scary there, and I still have the Merlin in hand, so I can shift for the Let It Go if he were to play another Crab next turn. He plays Flaversham instead. So that's one thing I do like about this deck, the power of that Elsa. He, knowing I could potentially shift, goes ahead and gets rid of the Squirrel. Squirrelin does get to do his effect on the way out, too. I do have Castle now, which is quite nice. Goes ahead and does, hey, how far I'll go. And I very much am aware that, like, I need to start winning this game very quickly, because if they get a Tamatoa dime out and they can protect it with something like Pete, like, I was pretty fortunate to be able to take it out that time, but it cost a lot, right? It costs so much to bounce the Elsa, to replay the Elsa, so it works. It keeps you alive, but it's hardly efficient. There goes Elsa with and then along came Zeus. He hurled his thunderbolt. And our opponent is on 14 ink. They're very much in the, I'm going to just combo off, do whatever I want phase of the game. So at this point, I'm kind of like, yeah, I just kind of need to go quickly. So I think we shift. We shift onto the Crab. I go search out. I don't know if I get Big Elsa or Hades or the cast. I don't remember what I get here. So I opt to get Cogsworth because I want the resist. Because at this point, my opponent is on blue steel, so they don't have Ruby. So what I like about Cogsworth here is now, and this actually ends up being huge in this next turn, my opponent kind of forgot that Cogsworth gives them resist. And so now the Rabbit won't die to the Pete. So he attacks the Merlin, forgetting it's only going to hit it for 2 because of the resist. And his plan is to follow up with the Long Game Zeus. And that just knocks out 4 lore on my board. Or, sorry, 2 lore on my board. But because the Cogsworth gives it resist, and most of the removal in this blue steel deck is going to be this damage-based removal, unless they also happen to be running Hades or Let It Go, which I don't know how many of them are. Our opponent does the Zeus, and then is surprised when it's like, and he was like, I forgot. He said, I completely forgot about the resist. I thought it was 3 from the Pete, and then the Zeus would finish him off. So our Merlin gets to live. There's a lucky dime with quite a few items on board. There's a Chicha. And so at this point, I need to go quick. Luckily, we have double castle, so at this point, it's like, okay, you answer me. Here's castle. First, I can cast Friends, castle, and now you have to not only clean up my board with resist on there, you have to answer 2 castles. And I move the Rabbit there as well. I move the Rabbit specifically because the Rabbit is the one I want to... It sounds a little counterintuitive because I want him... If the Rabbit dies, I get to draw a card of it, and I'm trying to keep him away from hitting the Cogsworth. If I move the Cogsworth there, he has every reason to take it out. There's Big Tamatoa. Flaversham is going to get him the card draw. Look at all those items. Holy moly, that Tamatoa is going to dime for what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, so this my opponent just put me on a 2-turn clock. Luckily, I put them on a 1-turn clock that says, no, you have to stop me now or I'm going to win. And that's what you have to do against these decks. You have to go faster, because if this went on for another 2-3 turns, it's over. But Castle gets us there. That's the deck. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoy playing Blurple as well. It is really fun. It's some of the most fun I've had with a deck. I don't know how strong it is. I'm not saying I recommend you take this to a big tournament or anything, because I do think it has a lot of flaws, and I'm not even sure this is the optimized version of it. But if you want to have a good time, if you want to play a color maybe you don't play all the time, I do think this deck is very enjoyable to play, and I think it's got a lot of lines. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I absolutely love to hear your ideas and your thoughts and your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. I'm trying to make a push to put more and more content out that you guys can enjoy. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care.